So this is Luke Marusiak, and I'm calling the Monday, September 16th, 2024 Planning Commission to order, and it's 7:03 p.m. First, I'll do a roll call. I'm the chair, Luke Marusiak, the vice chair.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Kilcup. Did we get any, I didn't get an email on that. Let me come back to that. Commissioner Crone is excused. Commissioner Lambert. And then Commissioner Murphy.
Present.
Okay, seeing that we do have a quorum, and I'll wait a little bit to see if Commissioner Kilcup joins. At this point, I would like to open up for introduction for our new planning commissioner meeting or member. Oh, actually, I see Commissioner Lambert, you've joined us. Commissioner Lambert. Okay, I think he's there. Okay. I'd like an introduction from our new planning commissioner.
Thank the chair. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm new to the commission. This is my first meeting today. Really excited to be serving the community. I've lived in Snoqualmie for a number of years now, have a young family that we're raising up on the ridge. Excited to be serving alongside a wonderful group of commissioners. I've been studying up and following your work and viewing some of your past meetings. So excited to be contributing today, and look forward to learning from the team here.
Yeah, likewise. Glad to have you. Welcome aboard. So there'll probably be more opportunity for conversation, but right now I do want to begin. And at this point, I would like to move that we approve the agenda as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And Commissioner Lambert, I see you're on.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, it was traffic.
Okay, no worries. Okay. And at this point, I move that we approve the minutes dated August 5th, 2024 and September 3rd, 2024 as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those minutes are approved. And now I'd like to move on to agenda item number 2, the Historic Downtown Retail District Overlay Code Amendments.
Good evening. It is. Oh, are you gonna do a little intro?
Yeah. Sorry, did I just miss the?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, council liaison report. Yes, my mistake. Let us hear from our council member, Councilmember Johnson.
Sorry, I couldn't be with you at your last meeting. I was reviewing the mayor's proposed budget with the rest of the council. And that is the only item that I want to include the commission on. The mayor's proposed budget is now before the council, and it focuses on 3 main levers that are tools in the toolbox for budgeting, for governmental budgeting. There's balancing levels of service, so we could add or subtract levels of service. There's economic development, which can do a number of different things. And then there's revenue. So that's increasing taxes more directly, that sort of thing. In a way, the economic development is kind of an increase in revenue as well, but through growth rather than direct action on changing what the tax structure is. Do you remember that in the background of balancing the budget, there is a 1% property tax cap in the state of Washington. And that is the primary source of revenue for the city of Snoqualmie, being as it is a largely residential community we don't have a large number of commercial developments. Some, but it's mostly residential. The budget attempts to meet the goals of the council that were set forth at our last retreat earlier this year, which are encouraging economic vibrancy, enhancing and preserving neighborhood livability and quality of life, investing in transportation and infrastructure, assuring a safe community, and ensuring fiscal transparency and operational stability. The mayor's proposed budget, which has not been approved by the council, but that is what is before us, includes sources and uses for the next 2 years of the CIP, including the community center expansion. Do you remember from, I believe it was the last time or one of the recent times that I presented to the Planning Commission, the community center expansion will not be approved for construction to begin by the council until the funding is in place. That's by council, what's the word? Motion is a name for that. Resolution, there we go, council resolution. We are still somewhere around 4 or 5 million, something like that, depending on who's counting, short, which could be covered mostly by the King County Aquatics Grant. So we'll see if we get that or not, and that may be a determining factor. But just to point out that the community center is included in the budget. The mayor's proposed budget has the city's general operating fund dipping into reserves in 2029, which is actually good news because due to the property tax limit, there is essentially a guarantee that through time, the revenues and the expenditures will cross over. If you watch our council meetings, you'll hear us talking about when the lines cross, and we all know what we're referring to. We're referring to the revenues and the expenditures, especially in the general fund. And those typically cross within the next like 2 years. And the fact that it's out at 2029 is a good thing. So this is a balanced budget that's before us. The total sources would be 143 million, and the total uses would be 155 million, which sounds upside down at first, but it does include the community center expansion, which would be most of that overage. And that's mostly funded by prior one-time sources like real estate excise tax. So those are funds that are already in place. They're not going to be new funds. Some of it is, but most of it is not. And then for the first time, certainly in living memory, the city is going to assume a 5% vacancy rate in staffing with 120 FTE. And in turn, the city will add 3 FTEs to fire. That's the biggest change in staffing. And that will move us away from our reliance currently on mandatory overtimes for our firefighters. The city is also currently reviewing the utility rates, our interlocal agreement with North Bend for policing, and a comprehensive fee study, and a few other odds and ends that could impact the budget, including future residential and commercial building and upcoming union contracts. So we'll see what those do to the budget as those eventualities occur, however they fall. The council is likely to adopt the 2024-2025 budget in early October. Like I said, we have not actually done that yet, but that is our current intended calendar. We do have until the end of this calendar year to do it legally. So that was my update on where we're at with the budget. And if there are any significant changes, I'll be sure to let the Planning Commission know about it. And I'll be happy to take any questions, either about that or anything else.
So I do want to, actually, I'll go around the room and then we'll, it's my question. Vice Chair Tessman, any questions for Councilmember Johnson?
Just a couple tonight, if you'll bear with me. First question, Councilmember Johnson, has the city done any planning or has an analysis been done at all anticipating impacts to the city should the climate law be repealed with the initiative currently on the ballot? In short, do we anticipate, a reduction in funding or any negative impacts were it to succeed?
I am not aware of that being factored in, but that is a question I will ask our finance director.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then the second question I had concerns North Bend and our provision of policing services to them under contract. My understanding is they've hired a consultant to evaluate whether or not that arrangement makes sense for them. Obviously, as context, we had the sales tax increase approved by voters. And so my question is, let's say they ultimately decide to forego our police services. What does the city is the city positioned for that? Do we understand what the impact would be? Because my understanding is, we obviously did a lot of work to get up to full staffing, and full staffing was obviously predicated on providing police services both to Snoqualmie and North Bend. So what does that future mean potentially without North Bend?
Yeah, it would definitely require a significant reworking of the general fund. My understanding is that those exact numbers are not in place because there'd be a tremendous amount of uncertainty if that were to occur. So the short answer is we do have the funds in reserve in an emergency to cover whatever kinds of shortfalls there were while we figure out a long-term solution. So I'm not concerned that like we would go bankrupt if that were to occur. But certainly we do have a significant amount of cost that capital costs and those kinds of things that could be affected. So the long answer is that it's to be determined, and it will be a long process for the administration to put together a package of budget amendments for us to kind of reconcile that eventuality if it occurred. But we'll see how things go. I think that our community and the community of North Bend benefit greatly from our partnership, and hopefully we can come up with some sort of a resolution that is mutually beneficial to both parties.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Smith?
Now, those were great questions and topics discussed. Nothing else to add or ask right now.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Lambert, any questions for Councilmember Johnson?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, just one question. I'm seeing some encouraging activity or the splash pad. Any update from the council on its progress and timelines there?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I want to be careful about what I say and don't say because being an elected person, people listen to audio recordings like this. So I'll just say that I believe that there is disappointment in the progress and how slow it has been, but that whatever can be done to expedite, whatever it is, the process is being done. But it likely will not be ready until next summer, which is not what was originally expected or planned for.
Thank you. Appreciate the update. No further questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Johnson, I just wanted to clarify, I was making a note. You mentioned that the crossover year was 2029. What were those two numbers you gave again?
Oh, so that's revenues and expenditures.
Yes.
So right, because the two numbers I gave, it sounds like we're upside down right now. Okay. So for the total sources and the total uses, that's for the entire city, all departments, including enterprise funds, which is basically our stormwater, water itself, and sewage. And those are funded entirely by our utility, well, not entirely, but mostly by our utility rates. We do get some grants for capital projects and those sorts of things. But those two numbers were 143 million and 155 million. And the reason that that's not included in the crossover is because that includes funding for the CIP, which is not part of the general operating fund. The main thing where I was talking about the crossover is the general operating fund. So those are the ongoing things that we do no matter what, not including projects. That's, you know, your policing, your administrative stuff that the administration has to do. That's gonna be community development, you know, permitting, those sorts of things. So that's just the ongoing business of the city that has to get done. And those things we consider to be ongoing expenditures rather than one-time expenditures like a project. And then we try to fund those on those activities on ongoing sources rather than one-time sources. So like, let's say that we had a large boom in building like Snoqualmie Ridge. That's going to create a lot of one-time sources, and you want to spend those on one-time expenditures. But for ongoing costs, you want to use the recurring sources. So that would be like your property taxes, for example, certain predictable sales taxes. So those kinds of sources are the things that go into the operating fund, and that's the thing that crosses over in 2029, which is a lot better than what it's been since I've been on council.
That was my second point of, you said that was good news because,
Yeah, the
because
good
it's so
news is
far out to 2029?
exactly. Yeah, it's
Okay,
good news
okay.
because usually that crossover point has been much closer in time, you know, 1 to 2 years. And the fact it's that far out really is a testament to how much work the administration did on crafting this budget.
And again, maybe you said it, you said a lot there.
Yeah.
Did that include the aquatic center or not?
That doesn't include the aquatic center. Yeah,
Does not include the aquatic center.
right. So the general fund, general operating fund does not include the community center or any of the CIP because it's the ongoing things that we're doing, you know, like services, policing, fire, that sort of stuff.
Would it include, does it include the ongoing expansion expenses of that?
Those would be covered by the Y. At least that's what's intended, is that the Y would cover those ongoing expenses.
Okay, so okay, so it'd be a net
Right.
one-time hit and then a net neutral to the city's budget is the plan.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I didn't understand that. Okay.
The large amount of money where I was talking about the 143 and the 155, most of that is from real estate excise tax, which has been accumulating during the development of Snoqualmie Ridge. And since Snoqualmie Ridge is no longer expanding, that amount that we bring in goes down over time. Yeah. So those are more like the one-time sources, we can say.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Okay, now let's move on to the agenda item number 2, historic downtown retail district overlay code amendments.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Andrew Levins. I'm a land use planning consultant, helping the city process proposed modifications to the municipal code that would modify the downtown historic retail district overlay. Many of the commissioners here have talked at length about this, but since there's a new face on the commission, I can reiterate some of the background information just to kind of get us all up to speed. This effort has been going on since December of 2023. At that time, the Economic Development Commission had directed staff to study changes to the municipal code that pertained to the current requirements that 100% of the storefronts on Railroad Avenue must be occupied by, or I'm sorry, 75% of the storefronts on Railroad Avenue must be occupied by retail uses. And the only way to get around that would be to advertise your space for 120 days in order to obtain a waiver from that requirement. So the current extent of that and the current extent of where that is applicable is in this part of downtown Snoqualmie. This is Railroad Avenue, where we have these bright red parcels that are zoned BR1. That is the current extent of the retail downtown historic district retail overlay zone. So since that time, staff has studied the changes that the Economic Development Commission proposed, which were increasing that 75% requirement to 100% of the storefronts on Railroad Avenue and increasing the minimum time allowance to obtain a waiver to 180 days from 120 days. As a result of these discussions, with the Planning Commission, the EDC, and several community outreach efforts that we had with business owners and landowners in both downtown Snoqualmie and on Snoqualmie Ridge in the Center Boulevard retail area. The proposed changes to the municipal code were refined to reflect a potentially more suitable balance of requirements, which proposes a 90% requirement for retail uses for ground floor retail uses for storefronts in the downtown historic retail overlay zone and along Center Boulevard in the neighborhood retail center of Snoqualmie Ridge. In addition, these conversations led to increasing the proposed required vacancy period before somebody can apply for a retail waiver to 365 days from the current 120 days. And just to kind of orient us to where we're precisely talking about, we are discussing this area, the black line being the current extent of the downtown historic retail overlay zone, and then the orange polygon being the proposed extent of the downtown historic district retail overlay zone. That's another result of the conversations that we've had. And then up in Snoqualmie Ridge, originally these requirements only applied to corner retail spaces. However, at the advisement of the Planning Commission, staff has studied its expansion to incorporate all ground floor tenant spaces facing Center Boulevard Southeast between Snoqualmie Ridge Parkway and the community center parcel. And that brings us to today. As a result of our last Planning Commission meeting, staff was directed to study the potential for combining the BR1 and the BR2 zones, as well as taking another look at the process by which these retail waivers are approved. The BR1 zone, like I mentioned, is this bright red strip along Railroad Avenue. The BR2 zone is kind of this dark burnt orange color on either side of Railroad Avenue. So after taking a look at the types of uses that are in this zone, and we've put them all here, so we took a look at the uses that are allowed in the BR1 and the BR2 zones and compared them, and found that currently the BR2 zone does provide the availability for the development of uses that are important in Snoqualmie and that do benefit residents, such as commercial services, banks, dry cleaners. These things typically wouldn't be allowed on the ground floor of a building in the downtown historic district retail overlay zone without a retail waiver. So the distinction is that BR1 uses tend to be more walkable, more pedestrian oriented, and the BR2 zone utilizes the majority of the uses, or allows the majority of the uses that are allowed in the BR1 zone, but also allows for some more commercial services that are integral to the fabric of any city the size of Snoqualmie that and would benefit its residents. So as an alternative to combining these two zones, we are suggesting that the boundary of the overlay zone be expanded to incorporate all downtown parcels that are currently zoned BR2. However, the underlying zoning of the BR1 zone and the BR2 zone would remain in place. And this historic district this commercial retail overlay zone would be expanded to incorporate all of those parcels as an overlay. So another set of requirements on top of the underlying zone. The other major discussion point that the Planning Commission had directed staff to study as at the last meeting was the approval process for a retail waiver. We heard concerns that an elected official or should be the deciding body for these retail use waivers in order to preserve the interest of greater Snoqualmie and its vibrant downtown. But after discussing with the city's interim city attorney, they highlighted a level of risk, a personal liability that was identified as unacceptable to individual council members. And as a result, we've proposed retaining the language that would allow the Planning Commission to approve the waivers or approve or deny waivers with all appeals being heard by the hearing examiner. So I'll pause there.
So let's try to set this up. Okay, let's go up 10,000 feet for a second.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, at 10,000 feet, we had a concern on the last couple meetings that a hearing examiner could take out of the hands of the city their desire to really preserve the soul of Snoqualmie, say that this is not going to have things we don't want in it. And the fear would be that if somebody waited a year, then they go ahead and put those things in. And so that's why we always said we didn't like the idea that, in the end, a third-party hearing examiner who may not even be from the city, and a lot of the owners who own these locations not from the city, could veer it a different way. So we said, there's got to be a way for the city to say, no, if you own land here, these are the uses, period. And that's the only thing that'll preserve the soul of the city. And so I think you've got a suggestion of how we can do that rather than the Planning Commission approves and then hearing examiner takes the appeal.
That's correct. It's not listed in this packet material, and we did not prepare a strike through that depicts this alternative, but one alternative that the Planning Commission could consider recommending to the City Council could be the just removal of the retail use waiver requirement entirely. And so there would be no waivers available for ground floor storefronts facing the street in the designated retail districts.
Yeah. So we said this is what has to be in this purview outlined by, and we can talk about BR1, BR2, but outlined by BR1, BR2 at present. And that's what it has to be, period. There's no waiver to that. So that, and I'll invite comments. I think that would get us over the hump of losing control of what we want for the city. Yeah, that would work.
And that's definitely something we can prepare materials for the next meeting, which we're anticipating being the public hearing. But it could also be a discussion again if the changes warrant additional review from the Planning Commission.
Yeah. Well, let me poll the Planning Commission that is here. Again, at 10,000 feet, and jump in if I'm wrong, Andrew, we're saying we're going to remove the idea of a waiver altogether. So never mind the 365 days and Planning Commission with a hearing examiner. Take all that out. There's no waiver. Once it says BR1, BR2 is for these uses, has to be those uses, period. And that the percentages increased, as we'd previously discussed, which are 90%, that those are upheld. So let me poll the commissioners and see if there's any concern at this point. Vice Chair Tessman, how does that sound compared to our previous discussions?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, we wanted to be more restrictive with the aim of achieving those ends in those zones. And so I think the approach you just summarized achieves that. So I think I would be supportive of that fully.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I think that seems more streamlined, less confusing, hopefully to folks that are trying to, down the road interpret what did that planning commission have in mind when they proposed this
Right.
some years ago? I that seems clear to me.
Okay. Commissioner Lambert?
Sorry, I just want for clarity, so can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we saying that we're not going to have any exceptions for a process by which we allow people to put in a different business? It doesn't matter how long it stays. So it could stay vacant for 5 years, and we're gonna not allow them to put anything in there.
We're saying it has to conform to BR1 and BR2, which is a pretty extensive thing within the historic district. So yes, basically, technically what you're saying, yes, we would say that if they couldn't fit what we want in there.
Mike,
Obviously, the council could legislate different uses for BR1 or BR2, but that's the recommendation of the planning commission.
do you mind if I clarify my understanding of what you're saying, just
Yes.
for my own
I
benefit?
don't mind at all.
So the 90% of the storefronts within these designated areas would be required to comply with the limited list of retail uses that are allowed in these commercial zones. 10% of these storefronts would be allowed to be any use within the underlying BR1 or BR2 zone. So if the ratio of storefronts was right at that 90-10, then if a retail business did go out of business and or if a vacancy opened up for whatever reason, it would either need to wait until the ratio changed such that it could apply for a business license as one of the 10% storefronts, or it would need to remain vacant until it could get a tenant that was proposing a land use consistent with the limited list of retail uses allowed in the commercial zone. I hope that didn't make it more confusing.
Yeah, does that answer your question?
Sharing mode. Waiting for connection. Bluetooth connected.
Does it answer your question, Commissioner Lambert?
I hate to say this, but I had technical issues and didn't hear anything.
Oh, wow.
So sorry, I just got the speakers back working.
Sure. Would you like me to reiterate?
Yeah,
So-
take it. Go ahead. One more time.
So
Summarize.
under what's being proposed, you have 90% of the storefronts in these designated districts would be required to comply with the limited list of walkable retail uses that we've proposed. 10% of the storefronts on the ground floor could be any use that's allowed in the underlying BR1 or BR2 zone. And so if a vacancy was to occur and the ratio was such that we already had 90% to 10%, 90% retail uses, or less than 90% retail uses and greater than 10% non-retail uses, then that vacancy would have to either find a bona fide retail use or wait until the ratio was such that it could have any use in the underlying zone, which would typically mean either a new retail space is constructed or non-retail use gets converted to a retail use.
Yeah. But we are basically saying, if you own property in these areas, and one of our concerns was that a number of folks outside the area actually own those properties, is it has to comply to what we list in those two zones. Has to comply with that list of, here's the uses you have.
Which I have that list. I can pull it up if that would be helpful. It's the uses at the top here. So bookstores, furniture stores, sporting goods, beauty shops, restaurants, things that promote walkable downtowns.
Keep scrolling down.
So for example, your dentist's office, accounting offices, real estate offices are not considered retail uses, and they would fall into that 10%.
I wish that Commissioner Kilcup was there. I mean, there was a big concern of what happened on the ridge with that corner area being Frosted Window Medical Center, which, yeah, it's not something we want to be, that and real estate offices, things like that. We don't want those expanding and ruining what we want is the character of Snoqualmie.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Chair?
Sure.
If we expand this commercial area in downtown, and it includes the current area that has houses, and our like the current like makeup of this area, like we're going to be far from 90% for a decade or more. Like especially with how many houses are in that area. Like I'm just thinking like the dentist's office is down there. There's all sorts of stuff that doesn't qualify. So if that person decides to move and sell their house, that could only be used for commercial spaces when it's sold. I don't understand how that would work.
So I can answer that question. It would typically be considered a non-conforming use, and if it was sold as a residence to another home buyer that intended to use it as a residence, that non-conforming use would continue. However, if it was sold to, for example, or converted to, for example, a dentist office, it would not be able to be converted back into a single family residence.
Okay.
And there also was an element in one of the previous discussions that we might not be in compliance. And so there'd be an aspirational aspect of this as well, as this is what we would like the city to be. And we really want to move it in that direction to get to 90%. And so that aspirational aspect seemed to be something that the planning commission wanted to move forward to the council. It's like, if we don't, again, if we don't say, put a foot down and say, this is the only uses we want in our historic downtown or our retail area on the ridge. Yeah, if we don't say this is what it is, period, then it's going to go other ways. So particularly with a lot of the owners not being part of the community.
And I guess I'm to respond to that. I'm not against the idea of increasing the length and making it, more stringent requirements to put retail. Like, I mean, my house is on that map that was just up on the screen. So it's very, close to me. I worry about not having any exceptions in that in the system. Like I think there should be a way to have, like I've done my due diligence. I've done everything that I can to get my store filled, and it's not filling. Like, am I supposed to leave it vacant for 5 years? I don't want that in downtown either. And especially with expanding the map, like I said, we're like, if we can do a rough count, but we're going to be far from 90% for a lot of years before it's just as simple as, well, I just got to wait for that, for such and such to close down, and then I can open up and I can use a non-conforming use. Like it's going to be, I would assume decades. at least a couple.
No, it might be. It might be. It might be. And yeah, I mean, and the council may also, actually, the council absolutely will have discussions and weigh in on this. Our thought was that if you leave it open to an exception that goes outside the elected officials or outside what is already legislated, then we could lose control of it. And so that if there needs to be adjustments, it should be through the legislation, not through a hearing examiner appeals process. I mean, that was the thing that, yeah, we thought could, you know, we could just lose control of what the city looks like. So, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, acknowledging, interesting. Thank you for the context.
Yeah. So tell you what, let me finish the roundtable, and if you think of something else, so I'd already asked Commissioner Tessman, Commissioner Murphy, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I share similar concerns that Commissioner Lambert already described as it relates to the unintended consequences of vacant properties sitting for, I think, perhaps an unreasonable amount of time. I wanted to just get a clarifying question, and my apologies if this was addressed in a prior meeting, but my understanding was the appeal process, putting the city council in the appeal process, opened them up to unreasonable liability. Is that, I guess, like, how different, I guess, what liability would they be open to that the planning commission wouldn't be? I guess, is it because they're city employees? I guess help me understand that piece, because the planning commission would still be part of the, I guess, under a scenario described, still be part of the exception process.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have that same liability concern. Is that my understanding?
You know, I wish I had a stronger legal background to give you the precise answer you're looking for, but I believe it has to do with the appellate body, just the liability of the appellate body, and this is being a quasi-judicial site-specific decision. That would be my assumption. I'm not sure if it's personal liability. Unfortunately, I don't have the precise answer for you, but I can take note of your question and check in with the city attorney to see if they can provide more clarification.
Just to put a fine point on the difference is in the case of the waiver process being there, it was originally proposed, it would come to the planning commission and say that we say no, right? You can't put a something objectionable in it or a medical outfit, or really, we can't do that. Then the property owner could go to a third-party examiner and it turns into quasi-judicial. Have they done all their due diligence to go do that? In which case they could still put a real estate office in or something like that. And that process rolling forward a decade or two, and we lost our downtown. That was the fear of the ultimate decider being quasi-judicial, being a hearing examiner. So we proposed that appeal go to the council. And it was that point. So the planning commission is already out of it at that point. It was that point that the legal said that, at that point they have liability that would not be acceptable. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And so we wrestled with the fact that as long as we leave that hanging out there, particularly with some of the moves that happened on the ridge recently between Hines and that medical thing up there, it's just like, and the fact that we discovered that a lot of the property owners are not local, who just want to maximize profit, that the elected officials could completely lose control of the downtown. And so we were wrestling with how do we deal with that appeals process, and the only proposal that we heard that would give us a crack at preserving downtown, and it's, I'm not saying it's a perfect answer, but at least it would say, no, you've got to do this, would be to remove the appeals process and say, this is it. This is it, the 90-10%, let's go do that.
So the planning commission would make its decision and there'd be no opportunity for appeal. Is that my understanding that?
Right.
Okay.
Well, there
there
wouldn't
would
even be,
no,
Or there would even be
there
no.
wouldn't even
no
be a request
retail
for a
waiver.
There'd be
waiver.
no-
Basically,
okay.
the application would have to conform to what's in the BR1, BR2. And if that were to change, that would have to be legislated by the council. Which would not be possible, but it would be a glacial process that would allow us to preserve downtown.
Okay.
I mean, that's at 10,000 feet, the whole point is, what do we do to make sure that the elected officials, I mean, we're just at the appointment of elected officials, don't lose control of what they want downtown to be, downtown or the center street to be. And we're not talking about all of Snoqualmie, just those two relatively small areas. So.
Understood.
Okay.
Clarified.
So let me do another roundtable to see if we want to do a recommendation to the council. So I think that putting code in that removes the waiver process gives us what we want in terms of being able to preserve the downtown, and that we ought to do that and move it to council to go do that. So that's, that's the only thing that I thought that would do that. That and the fact that we recognize that there's an aspirational aspect, I don't know if I can be in the code, to the 90%. That I'm not sure what percent we are, say we're 70% now or something like that. But there's an aspirational aspect that even though we're 70% and there's some grandfathered folks in this area, it's our desire that this whole area turn into what we designate BR1, BR2. So, okay, I'm going to go around one more time. Vice Chair Tessman, any concerns raised?
No, I think I understand the concerns. I think that this is, and I think you touched on this, sir. I think this is something where if unfortunately we ended up in that situation, that worst case situation, where we had a vacancy for a sustained amount of time, I think it's something that can be revisited. Either the exact same revision that we're doing now, or ideally, and this is why we're proposing it this way, through amendment of the zoning requirements. So I think that provides enough flexibility should the worst case unfold. And then when you combine that with the fact that the retail uses themselves are tailored, but still, decently lengthy, I think, I don't think we'll end up in that situation, but I think we have flexibility to respond if that did come to pass. So no, I have no objections.
Okay. And Commissioner Smith, anything to add?
No, nothing else to add. This is really good conversation. I think. Yeah, I think it does get back to kind of the intent of what we were discussing, and it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to kind of think about some of these scenarios that could arise where, it sits vacant for a long period of time, and prompts the question of is no foot traffic as a result of an empty storefront better than suboptimal foot traffic? But I still think kind of this gets to what we were discussing in our previous meeting, and yeah, I think in the event of extenuating circumstances, we can always we or the council can revisit down the road.
Yeah, through the legislative process, versus the
Exactly.
bill process.
Right.
And Commissioner Lambert?
I still object. I think there should be an amendment or an exception process.
A waiver process. Yeah.
Waiver, yep.
Yeah. If we could keep it to the elected officials, I think we were going down that path. The trouble is we couldn't do that. I'm not saying this is perfect, but yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. And Commissioner Murphy?
My thought is, I think what was initially proposed was keeping, if we can go back down that route to put the elected officials as part of the process as the stopgap, right? As the fallback. That to me is like the great happy medium where there's room to meet the need if we have a vacancy for an extended period of time. We kick it over to elected officials to be that appeal. I'm not sure if that was one of the options, but I think that to me seems like a reasonable kind of happy medium, notwithstanding the legal questions that were
Yeah,
raised.
yeah. That's exactly where we were 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It was exactly that. The planning commission says, no, can't do it, and the appeal goes to the elected officials. I agree. I think that would be the nirvana, but we were told that that is not a legally viable solution. So I don't have a legal comeback to that if that is the fact. And so we're saying, okay, we went around and around. We still could then lose control of the city. But I agree with you. And with Commissioner Lambert, I mean, the initial intent was that planning commission says no, and the appeals process goes to elected officials, then you've kept it with the elected officials determining the soul of what Snoqualmie
Right.
is. And we did have a couple, properties on Center Street that went a place that it's not what I don't think anybody wanted. So, yeah. All right. Before we go to public hearing, this legal opinion we have regarding the council, the elected officials' involvement in this, is it a solid wall? There's no additional consultation we can do?
Yeah, and we might need to bring up Councilmember Johnson because he's recently had the training. The city does WCIA training, to refresh council members about the parameters of working in their respected roles. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I do think it's a brick wall. So it's either at the planning commission level and the hearing examiner as an appeal, or you consider another option like just removing the program altogether, which we did get legal support on that when it was discussed. It is a kind of a bureaucratic process and adds a lot of extra steps. So, and frankly, it really doesn't give the planning commission all that much leeway anyway. If you meet the 365 and you do the online advertising, what other criteria would you have other than to say, yes, fine, go ahead and make it non-retail?
Councilmember Johnson.
As an expert legal scholar myself, with absolutely no legal training whatsoever, I have to defer to the best legal opinion that I have available, which would be our interim city attorney. So I'm going to go ahead and just follow that advice. That said, one other thing that I'd throw out there is perhaps if the commission does propose removing the waiver process altogether, that would be a different scenario for the percentages of retail than if there was a waiver process. So perhaps if the waiver was removed, maybe the commission could circle back to, well, then maybe we reduce the percentage that's required for retail. That could be perhaps a way to thread the needle. As a
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Johnson. There is, just one point. In the event that there is no waiver, there still is a recourse for the owner, and that is to basically request that the council add to BR1 and BR2. And again, from a legislative thing, so it's not a brick wall for them. Whereas if it went to a hearing examiner, it could be a quasi judicial decision that again everybody hates, and yet is perfectly in code. So I agree, it's not a perfect. It's not a perfect solution, but if we, I just didn't want it. I didn't want code that it's going to be decided quasi judicially with a hearing examiner, and that's that. Particularly with what recently happened on the Ridge. So, but we do have a case that might be worth asking about. So, the Woodman's been vacant for how long? 3 years since COVID, right?
Yep.
And what's the owner's thoughts on the Woodman?
He or she did not respond to or did not participate in the downtown merchants meeting. If they did not provide feedback specific to this effort.
Yeah, so somebody wanted to turn that into a warehouse. Right now they couldn't. And who knows, maybe storing with a building that big, a bunch of space, the owner could make money doing that. But I think that would be absolutely against what downtown Snoqualmie is supposed to be. So I think, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but anyway, I'm going to make a movement and we'll see how it goes. Maybe we don't have a unanimous decision. So I'm going to move that we come up with a code amendment to remove the waiver process and basically specify that there is only retail space. Now, I do think it's worth discussing what Councilmember Johnson said. If we do that, perhaps 90% then is a bit of an overreach. Maybe there is a better number that would give a little bit more wiggle room for folks on the ground, living like Commissioner Johnson and others. So what do we think about the 90%? Because we talked about that at pretty good length a few times ago, but again, we always were thinking we had a waiver process on that. So what do you think of that, Vice Chair Testman? You still want to hold the 90% if we remove the waiver process?
I think I do. I think I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I support the amendment as proposed.
Okay.
Clear.
And Commissioner Lambert?
I'm against it anyway, so I don't know if it matters. I want an amendment process.
Okay. Commissioner Murphy? Yeah, Murphy.
Yeah, I support the 90% and the proposal that the elimination of the waiver process.
Okay. Okay, then I move that we ask staff to prepare the code amendments to remove the waiver process and then maintain the other aspects, including the 90% for consideration and a public hearing at meetings in the future. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 aye, 1 nay. And the motion passes. Okay. And it's okay if we don't have 100% agreement on everything. I've been in votes that were 3-2 occasionally. And this is one that, yeah, again, it seems like an imperfect way to go do it. But again, if we're going to preserve the soul of our city, one thing that I recall in a debate I attended a few years ago, there was somebody who talked about a town, it was Enumclaw, anyway, there was a town that was off 18, and they said we lost it. We had our downtown and everything, and we just let it happen, and now we don't have our town anymore. And I think that would be really unfortunate if we let that happen to Snoqualmie when we're sitting where we are today. So that's why I voted aye. Okay. All right. Andrew, do you have enough information to go to work?
I think so. We will go ahead and prepare that amendment to the strike through that you have requested, and we'll come back to you with more.
Okay. Community Development Director Arteche, any comments from your side? Okay, at this point, let's move on to items of Planning Commissioner interest. So again, I'll go around the room, go around the table. Vice Chair Testman?
Yes, maybe how many? Just two. One's a thought and then one's a question. So the thought is I was very concerned when I saw the initial information on the lapse in an SRO at Mount Si. And that predated obviously our most recent terrible school shooting. So I was very happy to see the updated information on the city's website from the chief. That provided a lot more context. Like, I didn't know that we had an injured officer and that was why we were in this situation. So very good to see that. I'm thankful that the chief is meeting with the community, and I'm thankful that it seems to be top of mind and that there is you know, I guess the day patrol is basically kind of operating out of Mount Si. So I think that's a good mitigation. So I thank the Snoqualmie Police Department for that and the city for that. My question would be also looking at the city website, and I know we talked about this before, but I think it's very important. It looks like we're about a year now since the council decided to essentially kind of pause things on the model train museum, and actually they put, per the website, the decision was to let's see, was to approve an extension of the MOU. And so my question is, because it's not immediately ascertainable on the website, is are we outside of that extension period? And if we are, is it going to be extended again? And really the most important thing is, like, is there any forward progress in sight on the model train museum?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes, I am trying to pull up the agenda for tomorrow's FNA to see if it is on there. 1 second here. Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, it is moving forward. And what we currently have in hand is a draft development agreement for the King Street lot and several surrounding several surrounding properties, and that the Pacific West Rail Foundation would purchase all those properties and do some sort of a process where they turn them into one building. I don't know what that process is, but that's something that is community development's, their department's business, how exactly that works mechanically. But the point is that it would be at that location. And we will be discussing it tomorrow at FNA. So I'd recommend that folks tune in to that meeting. That will be the first time that council will have had the opportunity to discuss it since we got the development agreement, I think about a month ago or so, to start reading through. And then certain things came up that kind of pushed it back a little bit. For example, the mayor's proposed budget. We were going to try to get it discussed a little bit earlier in August, but due to those things, and we were also we didn't hold a meeting at the end of August, so that again kind of pushed things out just a little bit. But the bottom line is, yes, it is moving forward. The council has not made a decision on will we say yes, will we say no. That is all things that the council will deliberate on. If I had to guess, we will probably request some amendments to the development agreement. But since we haven't talked about it yet, I don't even know that that's true. So we'll see how it goes. But the bottom line is, yes, it is moving forward.
Maybe thank you so much for that, Councilmember Johnson. Maybe a follow-up would be, and I don't know if you know this or if it's too soon, I guess, is the framing for the meeting tomorrow, hey, City Council, we are proposing that we go with one of two options, you know, King or the Christmas lot, or is it really, council, do we want to go forward with King?
It's King Street. It will not be the tree lot.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Tessman. Anything else?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Smith?
No items of interest other than just to say it's been great to try out the first pieces of the diverging diamond. It seems like I think first maybe there was a little bit of confusion, I think, at first, but it does seem like it's working really well. Yeah, I think it's a great sign of hopefully what's to come.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
Nothing for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Commissioner Murphy?
Nothing from me. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
All right. And I'm fine as well. So at this point, we move to the upcoming schedule, future agenda list.
Hello, Chair and Commissioners. Let me just share my screen. Take me a second to do that. Okay, this gives you a little bit of a preview of what's happening coming up in the next meeting, next few meetings. I think as we heard from today's discussion, we'll come back on October 7th with, or excuse me, I'm not sure we'll be able to come back quite yet on October 7th with updates to the retail district overlay. We'll need to discuss how much time that's going to take. But we do have the critical areas ordinance kind of keyed up, and that'll be a kind of a heavy topic to weigh through. So I would kind of prefer to keep agenda items on the low and low to give our senior wetland biologist an opportunity to go through the technical memorandum and some of the key findings from best available science. And then I have some dates lined up, but I need to confirm them. I'm not sure we need all 3 dates right in a row. I'm not quite sure if we want to start on October 23rd with more on climate change. It's another big topic that we initiated back in June of this year. And we will come back with retail district overlays, and we do need to program in a public hearing for that as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, at this point, anything more with the work program, or is?
No, we did slightly update it, just kind of rebalancing it out, but added no new items. So,
Okay, okay. Is the mill site on there at all, or is that already under its own path?
it's not on its own path. And the mill site design standards is on the future work program for 2025. So
Okay, okay,
towards the end of the year, we can kind of maybe put some fresh dates on this and kind of establish the new work program for the following year, and then kind of firm it up in January.
okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I move that if there's nothing else from any of the commissioners, I move that we adjourn the meeting at 8:10 p.m. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Meeting is adjourned 8:10 p.m. September 16th, 2024. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Bye all.